بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. النهاردة we are going to talk about a very important topic in dental education and in education in general. It's about rubrics in education. We are going to talk about it in all aspects, beginning how to develop it, why are rubrics important, what is its impact on the students and on the faculty, and how to construct a rubric and how to make benefit of it as much as these are our references, and I also have the references for the rubrics if anyone needs them. So by the end of this meeting, the following points will be discussed. What are assessment dilemmas, and what are the rubrics and why rubrics? What rubrics do for the students and what rubrics do for the teaching staff? What are the broad applications of a rubric in educational situations? Who is responsible for creating rubrics, and should students be involved in creating our rubrics or not? What are the types of rubrics, and what are some tips for creating a rubric and weighing it? And what is the next step further? So, what are the assessment dilemmas? Faculty members who are well trained clinicians or scientists often have little formal training in education. Who of us cares about having formal training in education if we have been a long time or a long era in the teaching? They may be unaccustomed to having their authority questioned and may rely on grading by instinct. Most of us rely on grading by instinct, and some of us may not accept, or we are unaccustomed to having our authority questioned. In addition, assessment of performance brings it with an element of subjectivity. If any one of us get graded or gets grades without using the rubric, there will be somewhat a subjectivity. My eye is different than others' eyes, especially in the dental field. Maybe one of us would find this, for example, let me talk about the operative, this cavity to be perfect. Others will have it maybe good, others maybe will have it bad, and so on. Questions about assessment and grading are most likely to arise when expectations are unclear or the rationale for the grade awarded is not articulated. Does this sound familiar? Um, Many of us, we have the students after the exam saying, why didn't I get an A? Exactly. Where did I lose the points? What could I have done to get a better grade? So if you don't have a rubric, then you don't have a verification of your answers. Maybe you can convince the student and maybe not. So student feedbacks about grading of the work, when we went back to the surveys and we found out answers about the students' feedback about grading of their work, some of the students mentioned that there is a lack of uniformity. They said uncertainty regarding importance and lack of well-defined assessment criteria are some of the more commonly expressed concerns among the students. They said, we lack a well-defined assessment criteria, we are not certain about our evaluation. In one study, the most frequently recorded student suggestions for improving assessment were improve consistency and objectivity. Some of the students suggest, these were the students' suggestions. They said, please improve consistency and objectivity, develop and use criteria and standards, improve the quality of feedback given to students, and train staff or the faculty how to assess. So this was the concepts of the students or their feedback from different surveys, or these were their suggestions in the open-ended question. What is very important about the rubrics is that we have to announce the rules up front so that everyone, both the students and the faculty, will know and agree on the standards before the performance ever begins. We will not do the performance on the spot. This means that at the beginning of the year, we have to have an orientation to the students. We have to announce our rules and our assessment rules at the very first beginning. Why? Because this has to be announced to both the students and the faculty. We all have to agree on the know and agree on the standards before the performance ever begins. Okay, so they have to have them in advance so that everything would be clear from the very first beginning and they begin to have their work based on this. How do we define rubrics? There are several definitions for rubrics. We can call them a scoring guide or a scale consisting of a set of criteria that describe what expectations are being assessed, evaluated, and the descriptions of the levels of quality used to evaluate the student work or to guide the students to the desired performance levels. Again, rubrics can be defined as a chart or a template which specifies the criteria to be used to evaluate an assignment. We can also define the rubric as an authentic assessment tool that seeks to evaluate a student's performance based on the sum of a full range of criteria rather than a single numerical score. And the last definition, which is very simple, it is a scale tool with levels of achievement and clearly defined criteria. But the important thing about this is that it is placed in a grid. So it's not only a checklist, and just will come in the next slide to know the difference between a checklist and a rubric. Here, what's important, level of achievement, scaled tool, clearly defined criteria, placed in a... In my opinion, my modest opinion, it is a quality of educational process assessment tool. So it is a quality of educational process assessment tool. Here I've got some, I got the important points from certain evidence-based articles. Why rubrics? And it says rubrics differ from simple checklists and rating scales by including descriptions of each criterion for each level of performance. So, as I've just mentioned, the rubrics differ than the checklist in they have the achievement criteria for each, or the description for each criterion for each level of performance. And the rubrics are typically used to assess some type of performance, product, or procedure. So every rubric is used to typically assess some type of performance. What is the performance? What is the product or the procedure? Again, why rubrics? Because as other authors said, as Knight accurately observes, evaluation is not equal to grading. If we say that evaluation is equal to grading, maybe this is not very appropriate. Evaluation can be more formative in nature, while grading is more or less summative. In grading, you just have the numbers and you sum up the numbers. But in case of evaluation, when you evaluate a student, when you say, I'm evaluating a student, you're giving the student a feedback. You are evaluating against certain criteria so that we have a better performance, a better objective performance. Rubrics can foster consistency among grading faculty members. This is another advantage of having a rubric, because as we have just mentioned, some of us, or maybe all of us, we grade by instinct. So grading by instinct, we can have human variations, we can have evaluation variations, but if we are all following the same standards or criteria for evaluation, then we'll have a line that will align us will align all of us, and we can provide a detailed feedback to the students. Again, one of the advantages of the rubrics is that the students, when they have the rubrics ahead of time, and we apply this in many of our departments, the students can self-assess themselves, and this is what we call التعلم الذاتي, or what we call self-directed learning, is having the student to self-assess himself or herself. So learning is facilitated when students receive feedback from the assessment methods that are, number one, consistent, number two, based on meaningful explicit criteria. Okay? So, in simple words, what do rubrics do for the student? Feedback on the rubric utility from the students. What was positive about the rubric usage from the students, from the surveys of the students in a survey conducted to the students. Some of the students said that it's comprehensive, it is detailed, it says what to include, key aspects, critical components, required elements, headings and subheadings. 18 of the students who contributed to the survey said this. Checklist, user-friendly, easy to read, clear, organized, itemized, outlines, breakdown list. 17 of the students said this. Advanced organizer, directs, guides preparation, what is expected. We have no surprises, which is very important, and these 7 of the students said this. Identifies areas of weakness, need to focus on improving, and 7 of the students said this. Comments section for feedback, it explains exactly how errors can be corrected. Identifies areas of strength and what is well done, and this 4 of the students. It improves students' projects. It provides explicit guidelines regarding expectations and making criteria, can prepare accordingly, motivates students to pay close attention to specific requirements, because if we ask the students for specific requirements, if they are aspiring to achieve an A, then they have to keep very close attention to the specific requirements in order that at the end they have the results. Ownership, students involved in creating the rubric, because students, sometimes we will involve the students in creating the rubric, and so we will give them the feeling of ownership. We will develop in them the. It increases learning and fairness. It provides scaffolds necessary to improve the quality of work and increase the knowledge. It increases the quality of direct instruction by providing focus, emphasis, and attention to particular details as a model for the students. It develops student abilities and impacts perceptions of fairness of marking. They will feel very confident and very fair marked. Reduce subjective nature of marking. It will reduce it, and maybe but it will not eliminate it completely, as we will say. So this is for the students. This is for the benefit of the students. We have said all the points that were mentioned in literature about the benefits to the students. But how about what the rubrics do for the faculty? Here, rubrics can assist in refining teaching skills to make them more effective instructors. Rubrics can help adjust the curriculum. We can adjust the curriculum because through rubrics we will find what are the students weak at, what are the students, where do the students need more development, and so on. Provide faculty members with evidence of whether a change of teaching strategy has positively impacted student learning. Maybe I was using a certain teaching strategy for this year, and due to the surveys and due to the rubrics, I discovered that the students, maybe I will tackle this part of teaching in another way or in another strategy for teaching. So I will improve my teaching strategies, provide invaluable documentation of scholastic merit for faculty promotion. I need to have invaluable documentation of scholastic merit for faculty promotion, or how the faculty will get promotion. creating and using rubrics can create a dialogue among the members of the teaching team. And this is very important to have the team. In addition, a group review of student performance can increase consistency among graders, addressing the tendency of individuals to focus on different aspects of clinical observation. They are very important in the clinical observation because we can recognize where the students need to be advanced, where the students need more tutoring, which materials do we need to provide to the students, which topics that we are going to emphasize or to have them in the, for example, our lectures or our self-directed learning to enhance the students' performance and so on. And as we have said or we have mentioned before, it permits comprehensive grading and it يعني concentrates on the student's strength and weakness and focuses on the skills being developed. And very important point is calibration because it reduces allegations from students about inconsistency in grading. For example, we can have a roundtable meeting among the faculty members and or the teaching staff and the assistant teaching staff, and we can have a calibration. We can all have, for example, different cavity preparations, and we calibrate them. Each of us will evaluate it individually, and then we can sit together among using the rubrics, the common rubrics, and then we sit together and we come to a consensus or we come to a decision about how we will evaluate the students and what about the critical errors and so on. For example, providing prepared teeth that represents each level of performance on a rubric for the operative procedures can be made available to faculty members who are asked to use the rubric to assess each preparation, and then the results can be compared and differences discussed and clarified. Such discussion can not only help to increase consistency among faculty members, but can also lead to needed modifications to the rubric. If we sit together and each of us will put his own point of view according to the rubric, and then we sit together and we settle what changes we need to do to the rubric, what points we need to add, what points need more clarification. Okay, and this article, it was in 2023, and in the absence of a rubric, the authors mentioned that in the absence of a rubric, we had experienced that assessment of performance-based tasks gives an array of responses, give different array of responses and scope of subjectivity, contributing to inconsistencies in scoring. Hence, there were discrepancies in the evaluation of the work and variability in the scores given. It was decided to explore the use of rubrics for evaluating narrative reports and identify the reliability of scoring and also explore the perceptions of teachers who used it for evaluation. How did they do this? They have done it with an interview questions, and they came out with a conclusion. Examiner one, they had examiner one and examiner two, and they had certain questions. Examiner one gave the conclusion: rubrics is a guideline for the assessor. Global scoring was confusing as to what to assess, while rubrics gave clarity to how to assess. Okay, examiner two said it's more objective, more focused solution, and keeps thought process within boundaries specified. Okay, so both examiners came to a conclusion that we for the process of education. Okay, so they had the experiment was based on that they had 9 narrative reports, and these 9 narrative reports were examined or evaluated by examiner 1 and examiner 2 individually, and it was observed that there was a wide difference in the scores given by the examiner 1 and 2 when the report was assessed without rubric as shown in the table. But this difference narrowed down between the two examiners when the rubric was used for assessment. Okay, so it narrowed down for when they were assessing the narrative reports, the narrative reports using the rubrics. So rubrics bring in objectivity to assessment by keeping assessment focused. It provides criteria to the assessor and thus minimizes inter and intra-examiner biases. And this was proved by experiment. It brings in reliability, and the assessors welcomed the guidance provided by a rubric scale and were of opinion that the rubrics help in giving constructive feedback to the students. Again, rubrics, يعني using rubrics has also its pitfalls. It's not all optimistic. Sometimes rubrics can still be subjective. This is especially true when rubrics are used to convert lists of qualitative terms, each critical and independent, into a set of scores that can be summed, averaged, and transformed into grade. So in this part, sometimes it is difficult to convert from a qualitative manner to a quantitative manner. And of course, rubrics can make more work, particularly burdensome for teachers who already feel overwhelmed. When we have overwhelmed work, and here comes the rubrics and we have to follow them. But in my opinion, we can overcome this by having the rubrics every now and then. It doesn't mean that we have to have the rubrics every time. We can have them, for example, for formative exams. We can have them for self-assessments. We can have them, for example, scheduled every when we finish a topic or something. I think once in a while, for example, if we have to have 5 practical sessions doing certain thing, we can have them for a once as a rubric, and then after this, so that the students would be clear, it would be clear for them what are the criteria for evaluation, and then after this, in between, we can have checklists. Rubrics, both poorly designed rubrics and highly perspective ones, can stifle students' creativity as teachers measure student work strictly by the rubric. Okay, so if they are very strict rubrics and we follow them strictly, we will not leave any space for students' creativity. Sometimes a student comes and astonishes you with a creative idea. Okay, it's not in your mind, it's not in the rubric, but he pops up, or he pops out with an idea that is very creative, and he has to be amended for it, or he has to be commended for it. Okay, what are the broad applications of rubrics in educational process? We have the rubrics, we will use them in different ideas, different places during our educational process. First of all, they are used for formative and summative assessments. Second, we have them for the exam paper evaluation before getting it out into the light. And at the end, we can use them for the learning outcomes achievement. How the learning outcomes are achieved by the end of the course, by putting certain criteria for evaluation for each learning outcome. We need to have this and that and that and that from different topics. We can put general evaluation for criteria using the rubrics, so that we can know if our students have achieved the. And here we have oral diagnosis rubric used at the University of Pittsburgh, and the evaluation criteria. Here we have the evaluation criteria on the left side column, and here we have the performance levels here we have 4 performance levels. Honors level must meet all the listed criteria. Progressing satisfactorily, يعني independently identifies the chief complaint, and then needs improvement, requires assistance to identify the chief complaint and identify the appropriate diagnosis and correctly establish a differential or definitive diagnosis based on data collected. For example, I'm just giving an example of one of the evaluative criteria. And the critical error, this one has to be also defined, because for the critical error, it is unable to identify the chief complaint. This is for the oral diagnosis. This is a critical error. And unable to identify appropriate diagnostic test. This is also a critical error. Or unable to correctly establish a differential or a definitive diagnosis. This is also a critical error. Here there is something which يعني drew my interest. Oral diagnosis rubric grade scale. In this case, here what we are doing is, it's not exactly the same for the third year students or the fourth year students or the final senior students in their competency, or it's different for the grading scale is different for each level according to the level of the competency of the student. For example, a third year student, this is a beginner, okay? So how can you differentiate the third year student from the fourth year student, or the fourth year student from the fifth year student? And this often happens. For example, if I'm in the operative dentistry department, I'm going to have a class 1 composite restoration exam for the third year, the fourth year, and the fifth year. I need to have an exam during these 3. So you might say, why should you have the exam 3 times? When he finished, how can we differentiate between a third year student, a fourth year student, and a fifth year student? This is only an example. Here I'm going to have the grade scale different. For example, I'm going to say for the third year students, anyway, for the grade scale, negative marks take procedure over honors mark. يعني النيجاتيف ماركس هم they are precluding أو أو يعني taking dominance over the honor mark. I'm going to say I'm going to take the negatives, okay, and then I'm going to evaluate the student using the negatives and not the positives. For example, for the third year students, 3 or 4 honor marks equal 100. And for the 2 negative marks, he is going to have 84. Okay, so I'm going to take the negative marks, and in this case, he's going to have 84. 1 or 2 honor marks, he's going to have 96. But if he has 3 negative marks, he's going to have 80. All plus marks equal 92. But if he has 4 negative marks, he's going to have 75. And so on. Let's compare with the fourth year students. If he has 3 or 4 honor marks, he's going to have 100. But I'm not going to look to the honor mark. I'm going to look to the negative marks. If he has 2 negative marks, then he's going to have 78. If he's having 3 negative marks, he's going to have 70. So here the scale is declining. The scale here is declining as we go further from the third to the fourth, to the fifth year or to the sixth year, whatever the curriculum is. Okay, so this is how we can differentiate. Maybe the oral diagnosis, maybe we'll have it every year. We need to have an oral diagnosis sheet for every year. So in this case, this is how we differentiate by grade scaling. Okay, and here this is another, we'll have different examples for rubrics of assessment of different ways of exams. For example, here this is a rubric for assessment of narrative reports, and here he used, of course, different domains or different criterion for evaluation, and he used also three columns only for the evaluation. He used exceeds expectation, meets expectation, or below expectation. Okay, so here it's less complicated than, for example, the other clinical rubric that we have seen for the oral. And here, this is an exam paper evaluation rubric. We can apply for the exam paper about the questions, about the course, about the levels of Bloom taxonomy, about evaluation of the exam criterion process, and we have different scores sitting together as an examination committee, for example, to evaluate the exam. And here is another example for the learning outcomes achievement. As I have told you, for example, we have what we call the program learning outcome. It has certain performance indicators, and using the rubrics, these performance indicators of these criterion, we will find out how much did the students achieved using the rubrics, okay? And then after this, we can say that the students have achieved this learning outcome or not. So this is another example for using the rubrics. We come to an important question: who is responsible for developing the rubrics? Of course, the school leaders, the curriculum directors, instructional coaches, and they have to sit together and they have to provide ideal models that can be reviewed, analyzed, and discussed at various faculty gatherings to help create a shared level of expectation. We have to collaborate with the students, faculty, and other members of the teaching team. It's consideration in development of a rubric. Even our teaching assistant, the teaching staff, we have to consult with them. We have to come back to our students and find what they did not understand about the rubric, what was confusing about this, what was confusing about that, and we get their feedback, and we sit together and perform and develop. The question here: should the students be involved? There are those who suggest seeking student input, like having the fox guard the hen house. But assessment experts, as Stevens and Levy, contend that there are solid reasons for student collaboration in developing rubrics. So, for some of us will say, no, we will not seek student input because the students are our foxes and they are guarding the hen house. But other assessment experts said that student collaboration in developing rubrics is they put solid reasons for the involvement of the students. In conclusion, the time involved to develop the rubric increases when stakeholders are included, but the benefits derived generally outweigh this investment. Okay, so in conclusion, as we have more stakeholders, we have more people sharing in the development of the rubrics from different aspects, we are going to have a better for the. What are the types of rubrics? There are two main types of rubrics. There are analytic rubrics and holistic. The analytic rubric identify and assess individual components of a certain competency, where in these detail is important to help multiple graders emphasize the same criteria. But holistic evaluation, this is done with one assessor. It has less detail and it assesses student work as a whole. And most of us are doing the holistic evaluation right now. So we'll end up this with tips for making and using rubrics. What about creating a rubric? Step number one, first thing, I just want to create a rubric. I will sit down and say, today I'm going to create a rubric for example, whatever, for diagnosis of, for example, uh, abscess. Okay, I'm going to evaluate how to diagnose an abscess or treat an abscess, intraoral abscess, for example. So the first thing, step number one, I'm going to choose the criteria to be evaluated, list of what students are to accomplish through assignment, and then essential learning objectives or learning outcomes. I'm going to list them in front of myself, and evidence to be produced, and they have to be measurable, because if I look for a dream, or I look for something that is not exist, I'm not going to create criteria that are not measurable. And what are the concepts that I'm going to teach the students? Then after this, after I put the steps, I'm going to organize the criteria from the most important to the least important in a logical manner or in a sequential order. This is the Then I'm going to have step number 3. I'm going to develop a grid. In this grid, I will insert criteria and assign specific grading criteria for each main category. Okay, so what are the grading criteria for each main category? I'm going to say limited, for example, limited, some, considerable, high degree, or I'm going to use the words poor, average, good, excellent, or I'm going to use beginning, developing, accomplished, exemplary. I'm going to choose among different vocabs according to the rubric that I want to create. Okay, the grid. This is the rubric template. Here, the stated objective or performance, or the criterion that I'm going to evaluate against on the left side. And here, the levels of performance, and I give them different terminology according to the literature and according to the most common examples and according to my experience in the teaching process also. So here also, rubric development. Stevens and Levy describe 4 key steps in construction of a rubric. Reflection is the first step. It provides the opportunity to think about what the faculty member wants from the students, how he or she will know when students have met expectation, how students have responded to instruction and assessment in the past, why this assignment or assessment is being created, and other similar issues. A reflection also helps one determine what type of rubric is needed and whether a faculty member needs to start fresh or scan or adapt an existing rubric to fit his or her needs. Okay? The second step is listing or defining the specific learning issues or objectives to be accomplished. The third step, the objectives will vary depending on the level of the learning and the goals for a particular student. We are going to have them organized. Okay. So again, the second step is listing or defining the specific learning issues or objectives to be accomplished. وبعدين objectives will vary depending on the level of the learner and the goals of the student and the type of the knowledge to be assessed. After this, we are going to evaluate our criterion according to their difficulty, and we are going to assign our terms of evaluation in the grid. Okay, so level 1, what is the language of the rubrics? Level 1 or limited, minimum expected from a student who will be receiving a passing grade from 50 to 59% grade. The performance descriptor is able to use common and familiar terms correctly. For example, if the criteria uses correct terminology, the minimal expected that the students will use the most common or familiar terms. This is a limited capacity, but clearly defines for the student what the level of quality is for level 1 performance. So again, level 1 performance that the student is achieving from 50 to 59%, and then level 2 or some, he's achieving 60 to 69% grade, okay? Considerable, he's getting better, he's achieving from 70 to 75 percent from the grade, and high degree is from 80 to 100%. In this case, the student is able to use common, familiar, and all newly acquired terminology correctly. What about weighing rubrics? Weighing rubrics, an analytical rubric in which certain concepts are judged more heavily than others. It's not a holistic. And again, the rationale is to communicate to student and teaching staff which parts are of the project are important to learn for a particular activity, and can be changed to stress different aspects of a project over a period as different criteria are being taught. So weighing rubrics is important because it helps in the analytical rubrics to emphasize which parts are more important than other parts. How to weigh the rubrics? We assign numeric weights to different concepts. Maybe one part is more important than the other part. One part I want to emphasize it more than the other part. So we multiply the total point value by each item assigned percentage to arrive at the point value for each item. How do we weigh them, or how we assign? For example, if we have the grade out of 100, and then we are going to divide our grade in different according to different criteria, or according to the importance of each criterion, and then we are going to multiply it by the 100 in order to get the final grade percentage. To get, the point value for that item. What are the additional considerations? Each evaluation criterion and quality definition are written, and care must be taken to avoid unclear or judgmental language. For example, we can have, for example, this sentence: home care instructions were excellent. This is more subjective than home care instructions were appropriate to the procedure performed. Similarly, you can say vital signs were recorded accurately. This is subjective. Is more specific than vital signs. Similarly, vital signs were recorded accurately is more specific than vital signs were recorded. Okay, so we have to be very careful about our writing of the criterion, and we have to be very specific in defining it. What are the additional considerations? Again, faculty members developing the rubric may want to think seriously about how the users will interpret the language. Will critical error be better received as a descriptor by the students and faculty members than the word unacceptable? If we say critical error, I think it has more impact on the ear than, for example, we use the word unacceptable. Okay, so critical error is more descriptive and has more impact than unacceptable. Also, in the rubrics, we have to take care of one thing, which is very important, is that, for example, if you are going to evaluate the student for professionalism in one item, then don't use it again in another item, so that the student will not get negative marks in two places in the rubric. For example, an error in hand washing in the category of infection control should not be a part of descriptor in the category of professionalism. So if we are going to put it in the infection control, we are not going to put it again in the professionalism. So we do marking. The length of the finalized rubric is another important consideration throughout the development process. A useful rubric allows the educator to focus on evaluation of the important criteria without having to shuffle pages of paper. The rubric should be from 1 to 2 pages. This is what are additional considerations. It should be valid. What does it mean to be valid and reliable? Valid means evidence supported criteria that ensure performance in question is in fact the performance being measured. And reliable refers to consistency in measurement across several performance events. Okay, so these 2 points have to be taken into consideration. Many electronic resources are available to assist the rubric development. In the future, faculty members can look for advances in artificial intelligence and natural language processing software that will give computers the ability to read, understand, and grade an essay, for example. Such capabilities have existed for some time, but we need a practical and affordable product that is not yet available for daily grading process. So this is what we see for the future of the rubric. This is our final slide. Suggestions for revisions to our rubrics. Maybe some of us have already developed the rubrics. What are the suggestions to revise them? Indicate weighing of each subcomponent. Okay, define required elements with examples. Then further, define it for the student and for the faculty. For example, if it's clinically acceptable, what do we mean by clinically acceptable? We have to give examples. Further division of the components. The suggestion is that we don't want to have a big component, but maybe for a big title we can have subcomponents. This will make it more objective. I like it. Very comprehensive, complete, nothing. List errors that are clinically unacceptable for yourself. List for yourself the errors that are clinically unacceptable, because this will make it very easy to put the other criterion. Okay, how much error is worth in terms of deduction, and weighing of each section, a visual display of costs from best to worst as a learning opportunity. Okay, so we begin with the best and we go to the worst and not the opposite. We begin with the ideal and go to the critical error at the end. Additional column that states above average quality of work. This is a suggestion that we have more than the expectations, because this creates creativity in the students. Place rubric criteria in order, step-by-step action. Self-evaluation of the students, if it could be added, is very important. We can have our rubric with 2 columns at the end for grading, one for the tutor and one for the students for self-assessment. Now, dear future, I'm ready for revisiting the rubrics, performing my rubrics, and adding to it as much as I can to have an overwhelming and nice and objective work. Thank you so much.